Every kingdom begins with a ruler, and in the empire of your mind, that ruler has always been thought. Thought wears the crown, commands the soldiers of belief, and shapes the architecture of your inner world. Every structure of who you believe you are, your fears, your hopes, your habits, all are built upon the foundation of thought. And yet the paradox is this: the ruler was never meant to lead alone. Thought was designed to serve consciousness, to translate infinite potential into form, not to imprison it. But for most of your life, you have lived in a kingdom where thought became the tyrant, whispering stories so often that you began to mistake them for truth. From the moment you opened your eyes to the world, your mind began absorbing, memorizing, categorizing. Every word spoken to you became a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious. When someone told you that you weren't smart enough, beautiful enough, or worthy enough, that statement didn't vanish. It rooted itself, grew vines of doubt, and began to shape your sense of identity. The mind, loyal to its programming, replayed those beliefs until they became laws, unquestioned, unchallenged, and obeyed. Those laws became your invisible ceiling. You stopped reaching beyond them because thought convinced you that this was simply who you were. But the truth is, the mind is not a mirror of your limitations. It is the architect of them. You see, every thought you think emits a frequency, a pulse that influences your body and your energy field. When that thought is repeated over and over, it becomes a pattern, and patterns crystallize into personality. The phrase "that's just the way I am" is nothing more than a declaration of repetitive thought solidified by belief. The mind loves predictability. It thrives on familiarity. So when you think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, and make the same choices day after day, your mind becomes a closed system, a loop that feeds itself. You are no longer the creator of thought. You become the creation of it. But something extraordinary happens when awareness enters. When you begin to observe your thoughts instead of unconsciously following them, you initiate a revolution within your kingdom. Observation is the quiet uprising of the true ruler consciousness reclaiming the throne. The moment you witness a thought, like "I can't" or "I'm not enough," without judging it, you pull its power away. That awareness, that single act of noticing, begins to dismantle the illusion of control. It's as if you step outside the palace walls and realize the kingdom isn't bound by fences. It's infinite. The walls were painted by your own imagination. The brain does not know the difference between what you imagine and what you experience. When you think a thought, your brain releases the same chemicals as if the event were real. This means every time you replay a painful memory, you re-experience it in your body. You create the same stress, the same fear, the same limitation, all through thought. But when you think a new thought, a thought of possibility, of freedom, of self-worth, your brain begins to forge new neural pathways. You are literally rewiring your mind to build a new reality. The crown of thought becomes light again, no longer heavy with the weight of old beliefs. Think about it. Every great change in your life began with a single new thought, a whisper that said, "Maybe I can, maybe there's more, maybe I am capable." That whisper was the sound of your higher self breaking through the noise of limitation. But for that voice to grow louder, you must become conscious of the noise that drowns it out. You must learn to catch yourself in the act of automatic thinking, those quiet moments when you judge yourself, when you assume the worst, when you repeat the same internal dialogue that keeps you small. Each time you recognize it, pause. Don't fight it, don't feed it, just observe. Awareness transforms what it touches. Imagine standing before a mirror that reflects not your face, but your thoughts. What would you see? Would you recognize yourself? Or would you see a stranger sculpted by years of inherited thinking? When you start to consciously choose your thoughts, that reflection begins to change. You begin to see a woman who commands her inner dialogue with grace. You begin to see a queen who speaks not from fear, but from power. She knows that her mind is her tool, not her master. She wears her crown lightly, not because she needs to rule, but because she understands she was never meant to be ruled by thought at all. The mind is a magnificent instrument, capable of creation, innovation, and healing. But it is also the most convincing storyteller. It can convince you of your weakness just as easily as it can reveal your greatness. The difference lies in awareness. When you awaken to the truth that thought is energy, you stop taking every thought personally. You begin to recognize that thoughts pass through you. They do not define you. You can choose which ones to nurture and which ones to release. The moment you realize this, you begin to step into your true sovereignty. You become the conscious creator of your mental kingdom, no longer the captive of it. And as you begin to align thought with awareness, the energy of your life shifts. You start to think from possibility instead of limitation. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if I fly?" Every new thought you entertain becomes a step toward freedom. The walls begin to fade, the air becomes clearer, and you finally feel the space that has always existed within you, the space of infinite potential. Waiting for the queen to return to her throne. Emotion is the language of the body, the voice of the subconscious, and the mirror that reflects the stories you keep alive within your mind. Every emotion you feel, joy, fear, anger, guilt, or love, is a message from your inner world showing you what thoughts you've been nurturing. The body doesn't lie. It simply repeats what the mind believes. If the mind is the kingdom of thought, then emotion is its heartbeat pulsing in rhythm with your beliefs, memories, and experiences. Yet, most people live unaware of how deeply their emotions are shaping their reality. They think their emotions are reactions to life, when in truth, their emotions are recreations of their past. From the moment you wake up, your emotions begin rehearsing your identity. You remember who you were yesterday, not through conscious choice, but through familiar feelings. If yesterday you felt unworthy, uncertain, or unseen, your body remembers it today. The moment you open your eyes, before a single thought arises, your nervous system starts to broadcast those same emotional frequencies. That's how the past becomes the present. Emotion makes it real again. You might believe you're living a new day, but emotionally, you're reliving an old one. The body doesn't know the difference between an emotional memory and an emotional reality. It reacts the same way. That's why change feels so difficult. You're not just trying to think differently. You're trying to feel differently in a body addicted to old emotions. Every emotion has chemistry. Fear releases adrenaline. Anger floods you with cortisol. Shame lowers your energy, slowing your heartbeat, shrinking your posture, dimming your light. Over time, these emotions create a biological identity. Your body becomes your past. You begin to feel like the emotion itself, not a person having sadness, but sadness in human form. That's when the mirror of emotion becomes distorted. You no longer see reality as it is. You see it through the fog of the feelings you refuse to release. You project your pain onto the world and call it truth. Someone looks at you the wrong way and you feel rejected, not because they rejected you, but because your body remembered what rejection feels like and reacted as if it were happening again. But when you begin to observe your emotions instead of being ruled by them, something remarkable happens. The mirror clears. You realize that emotion is not the enemy, it's the signal. It's showing you what part of your inner kingdom still lives in shadow. When you feel triggered, when an emotion rises suddenly and forcefully, it's your body revealing where you've been unconscious. The queen does not run from her emotions. She sits with them. She listens, without judgment, without trying to fix or flee, because she knows that the moment she truly feels something fully, consciously, without resistance, that emotion begins to dissolve. Energy that was trapped in the body starts to move again. Imagine your emotions as rivers of energy flowing through your system. When you repress them, they stagnate, creating tension, anxiety, and disease. When you indulge them unconsciously, they flood the kingdom. Chaos takes over, and you lose your center. But when you observe them, breathe into them, name them, feel them without drowning, you restore flow and harmony. Awareness transforms the current. The emotion completes its message and releases its hold. The body no longer needs to repeat the same feeling to get your attention. It finally feels heard. Your emotions are deeply tied to memory. Every time you revisit a painful moment, your brain replays the same neural sequence, and your body re-experiences the same chemistry. That's why trauma can feel eternal, not because it still exists, but because your mind keeps pressing replay The way out isn't to suppress the emotion, nor to relive it endlessly, but to witness it consciously. When you watch your emotion with awareness, you move from being the actor in the story to being the author. You step outside the loop of reaction and enter the space of creation to transform your emotions. You must first allow yourself to feel them. Feeling is not weakness, it's alchemy. When you resist emotion, you strengthen. Awareness is the bridge between who you think you are and who you truly are. It is the light that dissolves illusion, the silent observer that watches thought and emotion without judgment. It is the moment when the queen within finally opens her eyes and realizes she was never trapped. She was simply asleep inside a dream of limitation. The alchemy of awareness begins when you stop trying to change the outer world and start exploring the inner landscape from which it was created. Everything you experience outside of you first existed inside of you. Every relationship, every success, every challenge is an echo of your internal state projected into form. Awareness is what allows you to see that reflection clearly, and in doing so, transform it. When you become aware, you step outside the automatic programs of the mind. You begin to see how much of your life has been lived on repeat. Same thoughts, same emotions, same reactions. It's as though you've been reading from a script written long ago by experiences that no longer serve you. Awareness doesn't tear up the script. It allows you to rewrite it. It doesn't fight the old identity. It illuminates it. Because when light enters darkness, darkness cannot remain. The moment you become aware of a limiting thought, truly aware, not just intellectually, but deeply, viscerally, that thought begins to lose its hold. You see it as a pattern, not as truth. You recognize it as something that passes through you, not something that defines you. The science of this transformation is profound. When you observe a thought without reacting, you change your brain's wiring. Neural networks that once fired automatically begin to weaken. The energy that once flowed through those habitual pathways is redirected. Your brain starts to create new connections, new possibilities. You're no longer reinforcing the same emotional chemistry that used to control you. Awareness becomes the signal that tells your brain, we are no longer living in the past. We are creating the future. Your biology begins to match your intention instead of your history. That is the alchemy of awareness, the invisible process of turning old energy into new potential. Awareness doesn't require effort. It requires presence. It is not something you do. It's something you become. It's the art of stepping back far enough to see the space between you and your thoughts. When you can watch your mind without identifying with it, you awaken to a deeper intelligence, the consciousness that observes all things but is not moved by them. That consciousness is who you truly are. It existed before your thoughts, and it will remain after them. The more you rest in that space of observation, the more your energy expands. You begin to feel lighter, freer, clearer. You start to realize that peace was never something to be found. It was what remained when you stopped believing every thought that crossed your mind. The alchemy of awareness turns ordinary moments into sacred opportunities. You can practice it anywhere, in silence, in chaos, in conversation, in solitude. When anger arises, awareness notices it. When fear whispers, awareness listens without reacting. When sadness visits, awareness welcomes it without resistance. In that state, you stop feeding emotion with more energy. You allow it to complete its cycle. Energy moves, transforms, and releases. You become like still water, reflective, calm, yet deeply powerful. Awareness doesn't eliminate the storm. It teaches you how to stay centered while it passes. That centeredness is your true power. It's where your creativity, intuition, and clarity live. When awareness deepens, time itself begins to change. You start to feel less attached to the constant movement of past and future. You spend less time revisiting what was or worrying about what might be. You begin to inhabit the present moment fully, and in that presence, energy returns to you. The energy once bound by regret or anticipation becomes available for creation. Your thoughts slow down, your heart opens, your breath softens. You begin to sense a quiet intelligence guiding you, one that does not come from effort but from alignment. That intelligence is consciousness itself, expressing through you as intuition, inspiration, and love. Awareness is also the great purifier. It brings hidden patterns to the surface so they can be healed. The more conscious you become, the more your inner shadows reveal themselves. Old fears, memories, and emotional residues rise, not to punish you, but to be released through the light of your seeing. You can't change what you're not aware of, but the moment you see something clearly, its grip weakens. This is why awareness is uncomfortable at first, because it shows you the parts of yourself you've avoided. Yet within that discomfort lies freedom. Awareness burns away what is false until only truth remains. Think of awareness as the fire that transforms lead into gold. The lead is your old conditioning, the heavy density of unexamined thought and emotion. The gold is your awakened self, luminous, boundless, unshakable. The process is not about fighting the lead. It's about applying the fire of attention with patience and love. Every time you choose to be aware rather than reactive, to breathe instead of resist, to observe instead of judge, you add heat to the alchemical process. Slowly, the old density melts, and a new radiance emerges. You don't have to force it. You simply have to stay present. Awareness does the work for you. This is how transformation truly happens, not through struggle, but through seeing. When you become aware of your patterns, you stop being them. When you become aware of your fear, you stop feeding it. When you become aware of your infinite capacity to choose, you begin to live consciously. The Queen's power doesn't come from control. It comes from awareness. She doesn't need to rule over her thoughts or emotions. Her mere presence brings order to her kingdom. Her awareness aligns everything into harmony. She knows that the moment she sees with clarity, the illusion of limitation dissolves, and the energy of creation begins to flow once again. Asterisk, the throne within is not made of gold, nor is it found in any outer realm of status, achievement, or approval. It exists in the quiet space of consciousness, deep within the mind, where thought and emotion bow before awareness. It is the place where the Queen within sits in stillness, not to rule others, but to rule herself, her energy, her attention, her vibration. The throne is the symbol of inner sovereignty, a state where you are no longer a subject of your past or a servant to your emotions. You become the creator of your own inner kingdom, a being who moves through the world with presence rather than reaction, with wholeness rather than need. From the moment you were born, life began conditioning you to seek your throne outside of yourself. You were taught that power comes from validation, that security comes from control, and that love must be earned through effort. But every time you chase fulfillment in the external world, you abandon the throne within. You leave the seat of your true power to wander through illusions of success and failure, praise and blame. The outer world becomes your master because your inner world lies unattended. Yet the truth is, the throne was never lost. It was simply covered by layers of noise, distraction, and self-doubt. Beneath it all, it waits patiently, untouched by time, unchanged by circumstance, waiting for the moment you remember who you are. The journey back to this throne begins with awareness. You start to see that your outer life is a reflection of your inner state. Every chaotic situation, every unfulfilled relationship, every recurring problem is a mirror showing you where you've given your power away. The mind, when left unguarded, becomes the usurper of your throne. It fills your palace with thoughts of fear, worry, and unworthiness, until you forget that you were the one who built it. When you believe every thought, when you identify with every emotion, you hand over the crown. The mind begins to rule as a false king, driven by survival instead of creation, by memory instead of possibility. But the moment you return to the present, truly present, you reclaim your seat. The throne does not require effort to reach. It only requires stillness. You cannot fight your way back to it because fighting is the language of fear. You return through surrender, through the simple act of observing, breathing, allowing. When you close your eyes and turn your awareness inward, when you stop chasing thoughts and begin listening to the silence beneath them, you begin to feel the presence of that throne again. It feels like peace, but not the fragile peace that depends on external calm. It is a peace that remains, even when storms rise. It is the still center of being, where nothing can disturb you because you are no longer defined by what happens outside of you. As thought and emotion unite under the guidance of consciousness, your inner kingdom begins to transform. The mind becomes the advisor instead of the ruler. Emotion becomes the messenger instead of the master. They both serve the higher intelligence of awareness. This union creates coherence, a harmony between brain and heart, thought and feeling, intention and energy. You start to live in alignment. Your actions no longer come from reaction or fear, but from clarity and love. Your body begins to follow this new order. Your nervous system calms, your heart opens, your energy expands. The cells of your body respond to this coherence as if receiving a royal command to heal, to balance, to thrive. This is the power of the throne within. It is not about dominance. It is about alignment. You don't control your reality by force. You magnetize it through frequency.